Please welcome Scott.
Hi, my name is Scott Nakata. I'm going to be talking about routing, or changing a website based on the URL. And I'm going to try and show examples in Angular, React, and Ember. The first thing I'd like to talk about is what is a single-page app. A lot of you probably know this, but this is kind of a typical format for a website. You'll have a nav bar, a title, some content, and a footer. And in the old days, when I was programming, every time you created a new page, you would have to copy all of this information from one page to the next. And that became a big problem because, well, I was actually working on a departmental website with like 150 pages. Every time they added a new website, I had to go to all 150 pages to change the nav bar so that they would all match up. So a lot of the new frameworks do what are called single-page apps, and what they do is they have one file with your nav bar, title, and footer, which can be changed, and then they'll change the content based on the URL. So that's why I'm talking about routing today. Routing is how to change content. So this kind of project that I worked on is, it was an educational project for myself. I wanted to see if I could take all the three major JavaScript frameworks and just come up with an example of something simple in all three of them. And so I chose routing as a combination three of them do. I've created three apps, one in Angular, one in React, and one in Ember. They're all single-page apps, and they all look very similar because I used Bootstrap Twitter for my styling. So these are the three apps. This is my Angular app. You can see I've got three tabs: a home page, about page, privacy page, React router, or React. Again, same thing, 3 pages. You can see they all look very similar because, again, the styling is all controlled by Bootstrap Twitter, and it's the navigation that's a little. Oh, and if you're interested in finding out more about this project, you can go to my GitHub page, Scott Nakata.js. Okay. So when I looked into routing in these different environments, what I found was that AngularJS, which is the one I'm most familiar with, has a couple different ways of routing. NGRoute is the most, that's where everyone starts. And then there's also a UI router, which is a little bit more powerful. It's state-based, and that's the one that's in the demo. React.js had a couple routers. There was React Routing, which is a popular router, and then React Router, which is, I think, the one supported by Facebook, and I use. And then Ember.js, I only found one routing solution. Each of the packages uses different build tools. In Angular, I use Grunt. In React, I use Gulp. And in Ember, they had a command line tool, so I used Ember Serve. Okay, so let's start with Angular. Like I mentioned, the content section, in the index.html, there's a div UI view. Find where the content goes that's going to be swapped out every time the UI. Usually above that in the index.html, navbar and my header, and then below that I'll put my footer. There's an app.js file which configures the router. There's some configuration parameters, and in this case we're defining a UI. And you can see here I've got an about state, the path, or the URL / about. There's the file and the controller that's used. Okay, this is React.js, very similar. They've got index.html. The div at the top is where you swap out the content. You configure the router in main.js, and routes.js is where you define your various routes. You can see. And then in Ember.js, they've got like 2 files, application.hps, and you can see here they've defined the format. They've got a nav bar, a header, Outlet is where you swap out the content and the footer. And then in the route.js is where you define the routes. You've got an about and privacy.
She's going to be exploring to do MVC. Please welcome Elizabeth.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I'm new to coding. I just graduated. I'll be talking about To Do MVC. It's a project that's online that lets you find a way, in case you don't know all, there is a lot out there. So basically, to sum it up in a few words, it's speed dating for JavaScript framework. Basically, what they did was they implemented a single to-do application in most. Since they stuck different syntaxes, and that's an awesome resource for beginners or any to switch up their. So, don't look at that. Okay, so this is todomvc.com. Here they list a lot of the popular tabs. We can look at Backbone. Sorry. Alright, so this is the to-do list that's implemented. Here, the sidebar is really the key. And the top, they give a lot of source to the project's GitHub, and they give a little description of the framework. What I thought was the most useful, since I am a beginner, down here they give a lot of articles and just a bunch of resources for deeper into the framework in case it does pique your interest. If you don't want to go single through all of these and go through the source GitHub, they do have a nifty little download button where you can download. I stuck them all in Sublime. So here I was looking at Angular 2, and just to compare to something that I already knew, I was looking at Angular just on its own, and here you can just stick them side by side and see the difference at the app.js files. And you can see that there's a really huge difference. Since I'm newer, it was kind of hard to understand. I'm looking to just challenge myself to implement JavaScript. And so that was basically it. That was just an exploration of. And it's really exciting to see all the different ways. JavaScript really is kind of one that you can find yourself through the rabbit hole, and that's all. Yeah. Any questions? That's pretty really simple. All right, thank you.
Wow, that is really How many Node developers do we have in here? A few? All right, I'm going to give you some love. We talked a lot about front end today. So, wow, man, this is, how did that happen? Okay.
Do you want to just wait for it?
No,
probably
It didn't help for it. All right.
Keep mine. Command line is command line.
All right. Anyway, I'll make do. Okay. So, have any of you heard the internet broke a few weeks ago because of LeftPad? Any of you? Okay. So, in the Node world, we have dependencies, and if something happens with those dependencies, when you try to deploy, your thing breaks, and someone yanked their package off of Npm, and the internet broke. It wasn't that bad, but I'm going to help you prevent that from happening with a little thing called Shrink Wrap. So when you're moving from production and you want to package your code, the absolute minimum you should do is do Npm Shrink Wrap. And that's going to produce a file that says, here are the exact dependencies that I need, and this is how you get them. And now normally when you do shrink wrap, it's going to go to NPM, so you can take that one step further and you can actually load all those dependencies locally, so when you deploy, you're not going over the internet, you're doing everything locally, and you have complete control over what gets deployed. So how do you do that? So very simple step. You install your dependency. It could be whatever. You have your nice package.json. Then you install a nice little package called Shrink Pack. I just learned about this a few weeks ago. It is awesome. So save that as a dev dependency. And then you add an npm script to your package.json. And you do a few things. You prune your packages, which means you get rid of all the nasty stuff that you've cluttered up your repo with. And then you dedupe it. So you get rid of the duplicate dependencies. Then you shrink wrap it, which says, these are the exact dependencies I want. And then you shrink pack it. And what that does is it pulls down the tar files into your local repo. And because you have that script in there, you run npm run package. It does all those things for you. And then you commit those tars into your source code. I know, committing dependencies, that seems nasty, but it's actually really safe. And it increases your deployment speed and lowers the risk of things breaking when you go to deploy. Okay, so if you don't remember anything else, it's these 5 steps to make your deployments much, much safer in the node world. Any questions? Yes, it does. Because basically what happens is this shrink pack step essentially modifies your shrinkpack.json to point to your local directory. So even if you're using a local or private npm repo, it's going to load those dependencies to a local directory and then point your shrink wrap. So Docker is more the overall container. This is specifically the dependencies within your node application.
I'm creating local. Or does that mean that
So with Docker, it's a little bit different because essentially you've already installed your application and you're just deploying the Docker container into production, right? So it's what we call immutable, right? That avoids the problem that I'm talking about avoiding by just deploying a single unit of working code, right? This is if you're deploying your actual code and you want to prevent it from going over the internet to install the dependencies before you start the application. Make sense?
Are you writing scripts to unzip that tar for yourself, or is that a module that's doing that for you?
All it's doing is it's the same process that you go through when you're using shrink wrap. So when you run npm install, it's going to look at shrink wrap, and shrink wrap is going to tell where to resolve that. And all it's doing is it's adding this node shrink wrap, which is the local directory. So this is a directory local to my application instead of going out to the npm repo to pull it down. It's a tar for each one of your dependencies.
All right. Every presentation should start off with technical difficulties. So my name is Trey. I'm one of the many co-organizers. I'm going to help you give your first lightning talk. All right. So when thinking up a topic for your lightning talk, remember that the one thing you care about is delivering value to your audience. That can come in a lot of different forms. You can review a familiar concept. You can teach folks a new skill. You could shed light on a topic that's new or unfamiliar to people. You could also entertain people with a story. You don't have to deliver value by teaching a new skill or reviewing something necessary. Your talk can be really broad about a subject that you just kind of barely touch on. You just touch the surface, you give a little bit of an introduction, but you could also instead dive really deep into a niche topic that only a handful of people in the room really understand anything about. When prepping your talk material, use an outline. Make a bulleted list that will cover everything in your talk in order. And the first thing that should be in that outline and the first thing that should be in your talk is to set expectations. You care about expectation management. The very first thing you want to do is let people know what to expect in your talk. Let them know what background information is necessary to understand. Maybe review that or at least state what's needed to understand your talk so they know whether or not they're in your target audience. You only need one takeaway in a 5-minute lightning talk. Deliver as few takeaways as possible, preferably one, and don't be afraid to cut things out because you can always elaborate more later in the next month, the month after, or in the bar afterwards, or as it is here in Zito afterwards. You can always chat with people in a group. Also keep it simple. Limit the number of variables to decrease the likelihood that things could go wrong during your talk. For your first talk, please use slides. Don't use too many slides. Use as few as you can. This is actually quite a few slides that I've got here. And try not to do live demos. Live demos are really hard to pull off right. There's a lot of variables, a lot of things that can go wrong. For example, the Wi-Fi could kick you off, or something could go wrong with the projector. You can always demo to people after your talk. When showing code blocks, make sure people can actually read the code on the projector in a fairly well-lit environment. Even though it's dark in here, it's very well lit in the front of the room that's on this wall projector here. Don't use dark text on a light background. Or sorry, use dark text on a light background. Don't use white text on a black background. That looks cool in a terminal, it looks cool on your computer. It actually doesn't look cool on a projector. It's kind of hard to read on a projector because of the way projection technology works. There's a blog post I read on this. I think it's by Rebecca Murphy. I can link you to it if you actually disagree with this or want to know more. Make your font size big so people can actually read it in the back of the room, and don't put too much text on each slide. It's really distracting if people are trying to read while you're talking. Write speaker notes, edit and re-edit those notes. Script your talk as much as you can. There's no shame in scripting your talk. A good performance has a good script. You can always go off the script, but you want to start from that script as a baseline. The first talk we saw tonight was probably pretty well scripted. It seemed very smooth. A performance is fun to watch, and that's probably what your first talk should be. Ideally, remove non-essential parts you notice while rehearsing, and plan for the worst. If you have 80% of your talk left and 30 seconds to go, what is the 10-second takeaway phrase that you can deliver to your audience before you say, "And any questions?" When you get the 4-minute warning, panic. Sorry, don't panic. If you're ending too soon, give people your 10-second pitch and move to questions. After your talk, unplug and move out of the way because the next person needs to set up for their talk. You've got 2 minutes for questions. This is your time now. When someone asks a question, it's okay to say you don't know, and in fact, it's okay to say, "I'd prefer not to do any questions. Please find me afterwards. I'd like to chat one-on-one." Also, if you're an introvert like I am, congratulations, you just broke the ice. People now have a reason to come to you afterwards and talk to you. They know a little bit about you. You've put yourself out there. They want to talk to you about that topic. Any questions? Yeah, these slides are already online. I think I'm about to tweet them.